Welcome to Queer Lodgings, the queer-led podcast about everything Tolkien. I'm Grace, and I'm here with my usual co-hosts, Alicia and Lee.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us today after what's been a long period of radio silence from us. Life has been lifing, and we know that it's been doing that for many of you, our listeners, as well. So thank you for joining us. We hope to be back in your feeds more regularly, and we're delighted to be with you today. So grab a refreshing beverage, enjoy the flowers blooming in the spring gardens, spoilers, and settle in with us despite these difficult times to discuss one of Tolkien's most difficult women, Lobelia Sackville-Baggins.
Yes. So, Alicia, you recently presented at the 2026 National PCA, that is the Pop Culture Association Conference, on Lobelia in a paper titled Petty Thief to Folk Hero: The Redemption of Lobelia Sackville-Baggins and the Monstrous Feminine. We would love to hear the director's cut slash extended edition of this talk because Lobelia deserves way more time than I think she is ever given in Tolkien scholarship.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you because when I was doing the research for this, I realized there's only one actual paper on Lobelia.
Criminal.
And this paper, it's Revising Lobelia by Amy Ament Redig, and it's in Tolkien and Alterity, which was co-edited by previous guest on the pod, Chris Vaccaro. This is the only paper, and it's mentioned in this paper that Lobelia is often just in like footnotes and liner notes as, oh yeah, and there's also this other female character because
Yeah.
there's been so much research done on Galadriel, Eowyn, Shelob, even Rosie. There's been more work done on Rosie than there is in Lobelia.
Wild.
And I think that that's like a shame because like other than Eowyn, Lobelia has the most character growth of any woman in The Lord of the Rings.
Totally
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah, so when I originally proposed this paper, I've been on this whole Lobelia is actually like one of the biggest heroes in The Lord of the Rings, like for a while now. And I had not read Revising Lobelia yet because I was not aware of its existence because I had not read Tolkien and Alterity because I'm not a medievalist. And I finally read this paper and I was like, oh wow, she's almost making the point that I am, but not quite. Because like what the point that's being made here is that Lobelia is based on the old like Norse sagas and that kind of like medieval Northern European like woman that you see in Beowulf and other writings at the time where the women are they're there but not like super there and they're there as like a stabilizing force to kind of hold the society together and they're in a supportive role but not in the same kind of way like a modern woman would be considered to be in a supportive role and the way that they're written is still harkening back to the same kind of quote unquote masculine traits that we would consider like heroic traits like the courage, the honor, the loyalty, the resolve and all of that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that is untrue at all, but it's positioned in this paper as Lobelia has a character growth and turn moment after the like Lockholes incident. Well,
Mm.
during after the Lockholes incident, and that's what made her rise up against the ruffians. And I don't believe that.
Mm.
I don't think that Lobelia had a character change between where we begin with her in The Hobbit and where we end with her when she comes out of the Lockholes. I think that like the last bits of her life is debatable whether she actually had a character change there. I would say probably not, but I feel like you can argue that. But I don't feel like the Lobelia who tries to take Bag End and steals Bilbo's spoons is in any way different than the Lobelia who beats the ruffian over the head with her umbrella and gets imprisoned.
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out why I had such a different reading. And I came down as our friend Megan Abramson would probably be very happy about this, is I came down on its authorial bias, is why I read Lobelia as being consistent, and maybe this other person does not read her that way. Because when I think of the conceit of the Red Book of Westmarch being a found document, because of that, it has to have an in universe writer. And who were those writers? We know it was Bilbo and Frodo. And
Mm-hmm.
who had the biggest problem with Lobelia? It was Bilbo and Frodo. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, their feelings about Lobelia are going to sift through the text.
Yes, I agree.
And I think it was when Lobelia directs her Lobelia energy towards someone that Frodo doesn't like, at that point is when Frodo's view of Lobelia shifts, because she's not targeting him anymore. She's targeting a mutual enemy. And that's why you get this recharacterization of her as this good hobbit who's grown and seen the error of her ways.
Yeah. It's not her character that's changing. It's actually the writers, the narrators kind of viewpoint of her changing.
I feel like in a lot of ways that's very human too. I think there's an element as members of the queer community that we can identify with moments where someone defends us to outside forces and we are relieved by that. But we're not thrilled when they target us as a queer community or members of the queer community instead. And that view of who somebody is can shift through our own personal bias for sure. And people contain multitudes, both as people and as people that we perceive.
Yeah. Well, can you kind of guide us through here a little bit from kind of the beginning of where Lobelia comes into the story of the Baggins boys, specifically Bilbo, is where we first meet her.
Yeah. Oh man. If you do not mind, I will just read this part of my paper.
Go for it.
Because I did a little thought experiment about the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings from Lobelia's kind of point of view.
Yes.
Hmm.
I'd love to think about what was she thinking while Bilbo was away, and what was she thinking when he came back from the dead?
Right. So, like, to understand where Lobelia is coming from, you have to first understand, like, where she fits into this family. And she's the mother of Lotho and the wife of Otho Sackville-Baggins. Otho, at this point, is Bilbo's legal heir and is positioned to take the headship of the Baggins of Hobbiton family and to inherit Bag End, which is like a very desirable property. Everyone wants Bag End. It's bougie as fuck. We all know this. So Otho and Bilbo are like pretty distantly related, and they're
Mhm.
also not very close emotionally. Bilbo is like the family eccentric. He's never properly settled down, and he sees the Sackville-Bagginses as, quote, rather offensive, as said in The Lord of the Rings. And the distance between them widens over the course of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So during The Hobbit, when Bilbo just fucks off, disappears for 13 months, he's presumed dead. And the Sackville-Bagginses are deep in the process of claiming their inheritance when Bilbo suddenly reappears and derails the entire legal process. Like, they are already taking possession of Bag End. They are auctioning off his shit they don't want anymore.
Hmm.
You're holding an estate sale. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So Lobelia, who likely feels at this point that her rightful place in society and the home that she's wanted for so long has been stolen from her, accuses Bilbo of being an imposter, which I don't necessarily think is wrong.
I don't think that that's I feel like that's a fair response.
Yeah, especially like you get the way this is depicted in the movies where she's like, you're an imposter, and like Bilbo's like, you know who I am. But like, does she really? Because they're distant. They don't like
Yeah.
hang out or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah. I expect that they're like they might see each other like at a family reunion kind of like once in a blue moon, maybe even less frequently than that. Like maybe they've seen each other a handful of times over like the past decade or something.
Well, and I think from her perspective, you have to consider that this is extremely sus timing. This is extremely convenient timing. The middle of these events happening, like this period of taking over Bag End, is not a long period of time, and suddenly someone conveniently just shows up and claims to be the heir. I think it's fair to ask questions and not characterize that as the sort of very online, just asking questions to be problematic. I think there are genuine questions she gets asked there.
Yeah, especially when you take into consideration like how outside the norm of Hobbit society someone going off on an adventure is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think it's a reasonable stance for her to have taken.
Yeah.
And when it's proven incorrect and that this is Bilbo, she understandably, I think, gets angry and steals some spoons and storms off. Because she's like, "Well, fuck this. I'm gonna get something out of all of this trouble that I've undertaken, right?" Like, I'm not defending that as like it was the right action to take. I'm just saying I understand.
Alicia condones larceny to everyone. So
I'm sorry. She gave in, she left. She didn't tie him up in probate court for the next 30 years. And she took some spoons?
Right.
I'm not that mad.
very respect.
We simply do not know if they were taking possession of Bag End, had they already sold their home because they were expecting to move in here? We
Ah,
have no
Yeah.
idea.
that's a
So,
great
like,
point.
I'm not going to say it's right, but I'm also not going to say that she was completely out of pocket and stealing the spoons.
Hot take, everybody.
Yeah,
Hot take.
And listen, without her stealing the spoons, what opportunity is there for pettiness later on?
right, right. And I do want to point out something that I came across in a letter that Bilbo's reappearance was so shocking that no one ever dared to presume him dead ever again,
Yeah.
which prevented anyone from being able to claim his title of head of the family until
Damn.
decades later when Sam becomes mayor and passes a law that anyone sailing west relinquishes their titles and lands.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So Bilbo remains head of that family until Sam becomes mayor.
Wow.
And like by that time, Lobelia's family's dead.
Everybody's dead.
Yeah.
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 So like she has been effectively locked out of ever getting the inheritance that like by all legal right her family is owed.
Yeah.
And then like to further like twist this knife that they're not going to get their inheritance, like Bilbo then adopts an even more distant cousin as his legal heir, locking them out of it. So there's just no way that they're ever going to get what Lobelia and her family feel are due to them ever.
Ugh.
I think about this so the hobbits, there are a lot of Victorian influences on Hobbit society and all of that. But I think about this in terms of like our English literature and history of the novel going back a little bit further to say the Jane Austen era. And I'm thinking about how when women are centered in the story, the concerns about inheritance and stability of familial inheritance are positioned as, if not heroic, at least understandable and important, and things that are upmost in people's minds, and rightly so.
It's central, like it's central to your future and to your existence
Yes.
as a woman.
And I think it's just very interesting that the perspective on inheritance feels a little bit different when we're focusing mostly on men than mostly on women because of how society has structured how folks get to think about that, especially in earlier times.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to go into a little bit more into how Frodo kind of inherits Bilbo's attitude to the Sackville-Bagginses too, along
Hmm.
with Bag End. he was pretty much a child still, basically, I think. It's kind of interesting to think about, like, how much interaction has he actually had with them in person versus how much he has heard from Bilbo. How much of their relationship is kind of built on, like, each of the cousins that you always kinda talk about, kind of the weirdos at the edge of the family that you don't really talk about, and where a lot of your perspective of them is kind of built out of maybe a dash of truth, but a lot of gossip.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I do get the feeling that Bilbo talks a lot of shit about the Sackville-Bagginses, because when Frodo sells to them later, everyone else on Bagshot Row is angry that they're gonna get them as neighbors, right?
Mhm.
How much contact do those people actually have with the Sackville-Bagginses before that happens? Because they
Mhm,
live in another town,
mhm.
they don't socialize with Bilbo, so it's not like they're coming over to Bag End regularly or whatever for those people to form their own independent opinions. They just have this reputation for being sour ass petty people. And where did that reputation most likely come from?
Yeah.
Our beloved sour ass petty gentleman that we adore here at Bag End.
Our petty queen, Bilbo. And thinking about, like, Frodo moves from Buckland to Bag End, which is probably even a further distance, I think, than the Sackville-Bagginses are from Hobbiton. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm wanting to say they're Overhill, aren't they?
I think so.
Because they're still like considered like the Baggins of Hobbiton family, so they're still like kind of in that area.
So they're actually, like, geographically closer.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, to them, like, Bilbo's really, like, fucking pulling someone from out of state over to become his heir,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think it's just like, "Oh, no, is Bilbo the problem here?" Is Bilbo the linchpin here, influencing all these relationship dynamics before anybody even has a chance to talk to each other? But I do think that, like, when we do see those glimpses of Frodo interacting with Lobelia when he sells Bag End to them, tell us a little bit more about how Lobelia is acting when she finally gets, in her own view, in her own perspective, she finally gets what she's been owed for so many years.
Yeah, to be fair, she's pretty quiet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like, Lobelia herself, after she actually gets back in, she's cool. It's her son that becomes a huge problem.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, but, like, the process through which Lobelia actually gets back in is, like, so fucking problematic. I do not think we have dwelt enough on what a petty bitch Bilbo and Frodo were to her and her family yet. As okay, so Bilbo literally uses the One Ring to avoid ever seeing them. That is
Mhm.
how the conspirators find out that the One Ring is a thing, because one of them sees him disappear when like Lobelia and family are walking down the road and realize, oh hey, there's something going on here, and they end up putting two and two together to realize that Frodo has this ring and they have to like run off, right? So like that is the pettiest use of a nuclear weapon. What the fuck,
Pretty
Bilbo?
much.
And like just the birthday party in its entirety. Like Bilbo invites them in their views solely to reach a specific number. That
Mhm.
number is one gross, which is very vulgar. And
Mm.
then Bilbo gives this speech at his party, which is like roasting people in such a way they don't even register it's a roast at first. Like
Mhm.
they are invited to this party to celebrate the heir that Bilbo chose coming into his own in front of them. So, like, that's a fuck you. Get insulted by Bilbo on his way out, which is a double fuck you. Like, I can't.
Queen bitch Bilbo. Yeah.
And then after he's fucking gone, they come up because they realize that all of these people are carting a bunch of shit away from Bilbo's house. So like they come up to see if there was anything left for them or if they can buy things because it looks like all of Bilbo's shit's being auctioned off. They know all about this. They've already tried to do this before. And then they get the most passive aggressive fucking gift of spoons. So like I understand
Ugh.
why Lobelia was mad.
A big part of me is like, fuck yes, Bilbo. I'm like, yeah, yes, bitch.
And like I don't blame her again. If he's going to be petty enough to give me fucking spoons, I don't blame her for stealing additional things.
Yeah, I don't blame her for also being serving just as much back as she got from him. So,
Right. And like she was a bitch to Frodo too because she says during all of this, why didn't you go too? You don't belong here.
yeah.
Mm.
And I feel like that works on multiple levels. Like he literally doesn't belong there because he got shipped in from Buckland or whatever. He doesn't belong there because she belongs there. Her family belongs there. Because like Frodo's not quote unquote a real heir. He's not a natural son. He is an adopted heir. And it's an affront to her feelings about the natural order of society. Like her family belongs there. And then Frodo, when he finally does sell Bag End to Lobelia, he has all his friends over. They drink all of the good wine, and then they leave all the fucking dirty dishes for her
Just
to clean
for her
up,
to do.
which is misogynistic as fuck, Frodo.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with the
Not
petty
wrong.
gift of spoons. Serving, fantastic. Cleaning the dishes.
Cleaning the
Frodo,
dishes
you're incorrect.
that's a
Just
dick
no.
move, man. That's a dick
Offended.
move.
Also, her husband has died by this time. She has been
That's
waiting to
true.
take possession of this place so long. Her husband has died, and now, like, in her view, her son is the rightful heir. So she ends up moving into Bag End with her son. And then her son just, like, fucking wreaks havoc all over Hobbiton and
Yeah.
the Shire in general.
Yeah. Let's put a pin in that because I do want to touch on just for a second, just because I do want to think about like thinking about the relationship between Lobelia and Lotho, a mother and her son. Like there's really a strong case to be made of like this is Lobelia thinking about her duty to her family and thinking about what kind of a legacy she is going to leave for her son. And like all of these actions, all of this like quote unquote grasping, trying to get her claws, quote unquote, into Bag End, it could be said that in a particular way, it's not really doing it for her herself, but really for her family. I feel like that's something that might be able to kind of shift a little bit of people's perspective on her as a particularly greedy and grasping sort of character when you kind of think about like why exactly is she doing this and thinking about like what Grace said about the kind of like the Victorian sort of centrality of inheritance and also the legacy of the family, like that's so central to so many women that we think about, and particularly of a particular class that Lobelia would have belonged to. Not quite the same class as Bilbo, but there's like a little bit of mobility kind of expected because of that inheritance sort of positionality. So that's what I like to think about, like thinking about Lobelia as like as a mom can be kind of an interesting way to sort of shift how we look at her and thinking about like what kind of motives she has.
Yeah, I do think it's important to note that Lobelia is one of two characters in The Lord of the Rings shown as a mother. It's
Mm.
Lobelia and Shelob.
Mhm.
Those are the
Mm.
only two actual mothers doing any mothering that we are ever shown in The Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
which is a hell of a juxtaposition, honestly.
I think Tolkien might have had some mommy issues.
Just a couple.
Just a handful.
I think it's really interesting too, like there's this issue of perspective and how we view Lobelia, right? And so I think it's really interesting to consider that we so rarely see her as a mother. Even in most of the times where we see her as a mother, it's through the lens of the narrator's aunt, who happens to be a mother. Her identity as a mother is secondary to that of an aunt. And as we were looking through some of our research in this episode and everything, I saw a quote from Liz Fielding, who is a romance author that I know absolutely nothing about, but I thought that this was a really interesting perspective on ants, especially in the context of history and writing and authorship, where she said, ants may be kindly, selfless, controlling, or perfectly foul. But as quasi mothers, they are a gift to writers who need a catalyst to disrupt the lives of their unsuspecting characters. And I think that idea of ants being quasi mothers, that the author can shape and problematize things around in order to be obstacles for their characters without necessarily giving them the support or challenges that a mother character would have.
Mhm. That's such a great point because there's so much particular baggage that comes with a mother sort of dynamic that it just isn't quite present with an aunt. There's still definitely like the disruption and the connection is still sort of enough to add tension and to add stakes,
Yes.
but it's not quite as fraught as children with their parents.
Yes. And then the ants can also be, they can be the cool ant, but they
Mhm.
can also be the monstrous
Mhm.
character. And
Mhm.
I do feel like that's where we end up with Lobelia, or how Lobelia is presented, certainly early on in The Hobbit.
Mhm. Yeah. We've talked about it amongst ourselves. I don't know if we've talked about it on the actual podcast, but we've thinking about Lobelia as an aunt to Frodo, but as a mother to Lotho, and how that might shape, sort of how Frodo depicts her in the Red Book, I guess.
Yes.
There is something a little bit to be gleaned there, or a little bit to explore there about how Tolkien talks about mothers and about older women and about older women who have a proximity to our characters but aren't like their mothers necessarily. Basically, we don't see a whole lot of older women in Tolkien's works like as such. Lobelia is one
Yeah.
of the big ones. And having her be positioned as an aunt and definitely not as a mother figure to Frodo, and there is kind of a missing perspective. What was the relationship like between Lotho and his mother? What kind of contributed to, well, we eventually know what happens with Lotho and in the Shire while Frodo is gone, what sort of influence and what sort of power, I guess, did Lobelia have over Lotho, and did she try to prevent what eventually happened? Because we know she comes up very, very squarely against sort of the actions of her son, and in a very decisive way.
We should probably delve into, just to remind our listeners, what the actions of her son are, because they
Yes.
are not good.
Yes.
Yeah. He set up an authoritarian industrialized state in in the Shire. A fascist
It's
authoritarian
like,
industrialized state. That's exactly what Lotho did.
Hmm.
pretty much.
Hmm.
um
Then he militarizes it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
he militarizes it with a foreign force of people, like full-grown men. He exports all of the goods that the industrialized Shire produces until there are shortages and people are starving. There's civil unrest. The militia he has formed are sent out to quell all the uprisings. He ends up using that militia to steal governance from the mayor, sets himself up as like a little petty tyrant until Saruman shows up.
Man, doing like a colonization, a little micro colonization of the Shire.
I think it's fascinating the way that when we think of hobbits, we often think of the coziness and the second breakfast and all of those lovely sort of pastoral things. And yet, no one seems to talk about the Hobbit uprisings against fascism near enough as we should. And certainly, that's not something that I see the tech giants in the world who like to cite Tolkien as their reason for needing to protect the hobbits ever really noting that the hobbits were like, no, 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 no fascism, thank you. Just saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what happens to Lotho once Saruman gets there?
That's so fucking murky, guys.
Yeah.
So unsure the order and timing of everything that happens. But Saruman arrives. He becomes known as Sharky. He quietly kind of takes control of the ruffian militia that Lotho had formed. Lotho is murdered and quite possibly eaten by Wormtongue. I'm never going to let that one go. It is heavily insinuated that Wormtongue ate Lotho.
Jeez.
Lobelia, who is quite old at this point, ends up being imprisoned for attacking a leader of the ruffians as they are coming to take over back in. So we're not sure whether that happens before or after Saruman comes and her kid gets eaten, unsure. But she attacks this ruffian with her umbrella, which I think
Yeah.
is amazing because her umbrella has been at the center of all of the petty theft she was previously doing. And I love having the umbrella be the weapon in both cases here.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
And because of that, she is imprisoned in the lockholes. And that is where we find her when all of the hobbits come back from the fellowship.
This is such an important moment for her. I would love to know what's going through her brain at that moment, like when she decides to attack the leader of the ruffians with her fucking umbrella. Like,
This is my house. Why the fuck are you in my
why the fuck
house?
are you in my house? And also, like, if this was after her son was murdered and possibly eaten, like, what else does she have? And what else is she like? What's she fighting for here?
It shows such a consistent through line in her character that Bag End represents the thing that she cares about. It's the symbol of all of the other things that she cares about tied up in the existence of Bag End. And those things that she cares about clearly shift over her life because
Hmm.
by the end of her life, her son, who did the dictatorship bad, is no longer with us. And I think one of the things that I think is the most interesting about Lobelia, and the thing that I remember the least because it's talked about the least to my recollection or in my experience, is how Lobelia acts after she's imprisoned and released from the lockholes, and how she interacts with her society after those events. Where, Alicia, you talk about in your paper that her last act is to bequeath what's left of her money and worldly goods to Frodo, so that he can help those left homeless or who are otherwise hurt by her son. And you talk about how Tolkien states that that explicitly ends the feud between the two families.
Hmm.
Because one of the families doesn't fucking exist anymore, Tolkien.
Well, yes.
Kind of a default, but yeah.
The feud ends by attrition as well. But there's something to me in Lobelia creating this fund and recognizing the harm that her son did and standing up against the fascist bodies that her son helped create, the militarized bodies that her son helped create, and
Hmm.
then recognizing that he did harm, their family did harm, and she should do something to acknowledge, repent, and repair that. And Lobelia, as a mom, a lot of times we would expect or justify a mother just always defending her son no matter what he's done. He's her baby still. And it's really notable to me that there's a point for Lobelia where she says, no, he was
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
And I have to do something to make it better, even though I can't fix it.
And that's what, like, makes me come down on the side that Lotho did not turn out the way he did necessarily because of Lobelia. Because
Mm,
sometimes you can be a decent parent and you just get a shit pull at the draw with your kid and your kid ends up being a shitty person, right? Sometimes the
Yeah.
parent makes the kid shitty and sometimes the kid is just shitty, like, despite the parent. And I don't necessarily think that Lobelia was the best mother given what we know about her and like her really steadfast view of how society should work and all of that. So she was probably kind of a hard mother to live under because I'm
mhm.
assuming she was instilling those same values in Lotho as much as she could.
Yeah.
But the fact that she does not stand for what ends up happening and tries to repair what her son did, I think does speak to the fact that she probably wasn't one of those terrible Karen moms that you hear about.
I super agree. Like, I see this through line of her commitment to both status, hierarchical status, class status, is hand in hand with her commitment to dignity and inherent
Mhm.
dignity. And I think that that means quite a lot for where her, like, very, very deep down, kind of underneath sort of her reliance on some, like, external, sort of structural, I guess, expressions of status and dignity, which could be seen in holding bag end, basically. But I also think that that commitment to dignity speaks to something much, much deeper and speaks to a kind of respect for her fellow man, for her fellow hobbits, and the inherent dignity that each of them holds. Because being committed so hard to legacy of the family, to her trying to set up her son for that legacy, and then have that all kind of crumble away in his hands, by his actions.
I mean, to think of all the challenges that she takes on as a mother and the sacrifices that she likely makes,
Mhm.
and then to have your child betray you and all of your people
All your neighbors.
like that.
And to put such a stain on your family name.
Yes.
That's the thing. I think, like, that's what I was, like, trying to reach for, so thank
And that
you.
that matters so much because if we look at this sort of like Victorian era that Tolkien is raised in, he's born in the 1890s. There's this huge and this carries through in a lot of places in a lot of cultures within the Lord of the Rings and within Middle Earth, but this huge emphasis placed on how women hold the reputation of their family and are responsible for upholding it. That men may behave poorly, but women can't.
Mhm,
That
mhm.
women have to do things in order to make the men in their families look better, be more secure, all of that. And we certainly see that in a lot of cultures around the world too. Like this is something that is not unique to Hobbit culture, for sure. But then to have the men in your family do such a disservice to the family name that you have been held responsible for pretty unfairly by society your entire life is a mind fuck for sure.
It's bananas to me, and, this happens in Tolkien spaces with some of the other figures that we have kind of called between ourselves the bad moms, where everybody
Mhm.
a lot of people blame moms for their grown-ass son's actions, and I feel like Lobelia definitely takes her rightful place in that quote unquote "bad moms"
Yeah.
bracket, whom we're definitely going to talk about it in a future episode because I there's a lot that we have a lot of feelings about a lot of these women
Mhm.
and their grown ass sons. So
I think there's this strong possibility that Lobelia is a bad mom by some definition and a shitty aunt and a difficult woman but actually a pretty good person, a pretty good hobbit
Yeah,
in the end.
I think so.
And I think one of the things that I think is important in analyzing motherhood and bad moms and all of that is whether a mom continues enabling her son to do harm.
Mm,
And there's a point, certainly for Lobelia, where she doesn't. We don't have a clear sense of exactly what the timing was of all of that. Like you said, Alicia, we get the perspective through characters who are returning to the Shire, not who were there living through all of it. And so their understanding of the sequence of events, I think, is a bit muddy as well. And certainly, we don't get much information about that in the endings of the Peter Jackson films, much as I adore them.
yeah.
And in fairness, I didn't want to sit in the movie theater every time I saw it for 5 more parts of the ending. So, like, I
Yeah.
get the adaptational needs here, but there's a lot of story that got left out and a lot of things that if you frequently revisit through the films, we don't hear that much about Lobelia, especially the end of her story.
Mhm.
I think it matters.
There is this image where she is emerging from the lock holes and she's leaning on Frodo's arm, but insisting on hobbling out on her own 2 feet, still clutching her umbrella. And that is so evocative.
Fuck
It
yeah.
is.
And everybody's applauding her. Like,
Yeah.
that's what really gets me is, like, everybody's applauding her, and she
And
is
she's never
deeply
felt that before.
yeah, she's so moved by it because she's never felt, like, so liked and so yeah, and so appreciated,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh, man, what"
Probably because Bilbo's been talking shit about her for
yeah,
literal decades.
Well,
what a queen.
the decades piece is something really interesting to me because Lobelia is one of the characters that comes through from The Hobbit and carries through to The Lord of the Rings. We don't
Mm,
have a ton of those. That's the focus shifts a lot between those two works. There's something that stands out to me at least, which is that The Hobbit is written much earlier in Tolkien's life, when he's a much younger man than he is when he is writing The Lord of the Rings. And then even later writing some of his letters that clarify things in Lord of the Rings and all of that. And so I think we can see progressions in his thinking as an author throughout that time. And also, we are sometimes more rash in our 20s than we are in our
mm,
40s or 70s or whatever, and more judgmental in different ways. And we also have less life experience to draw on. So I think it's really interesting. There's a lot. I've been going back through Carpenter's J.R.R. Tolkien a biography, and there was a line that stood out to me, and I was immediately like putting this in the group chat, like, I have a thing I want to talk about.
yeah.
This is a really interesting perspective that Carpenter presents in his narrative fashion in this biography of the experience of the two Tolkien boys right after their mother Mabel passes. And he's already gone through a bit of like what family there is and everything like that. And then Mabel names Father Francis from her Catholic parish as the boy's guardian. And Carpenter says, immediately after their mother's death, he had to find somewhere for them to live. A tricky problem, for while ideally they should be housed by their own relatives, there was a danger that the Suffield and Tolkien aunts and uncles might try to snatch them from the grasp of the Catholic Church. Already there had been some talk of contesting Mabel's will and of sending the boys to a Protestant boarding school. And I was immediately struck by how the language that Carpenter uses is so evocative of the language that Tolkien uses to talk about Lobelia from Bilbo and Frodo's perspective,
Mhm.
snatching and grabbing,
Contesting the will. Yeah.
contesting the will and everything. And it was very interesting to me, both that language and then also how lightly sketched that is. In our group chat, I said to you guys that I've been listening to a lot of podcasts actually about medical child abuse and Munchausen by proxy. And so in there's been a lot of discussion about what best practices are today in the foster care system and trying to place children with familial placements when they don't have a way to be with their parents or what have you. And it really, really struck me that in Carpenter's own statements in this biography, he talks about the Tolkien aunts and uncles and grandparents and the Suffield aunts and uncles and grandparents being people who were in these children's lives, who loved them, who Mabel was still in contact with, even though they weren't providing significant financial support because they were not fond of her conversion to Catholicism. And that these boys had lived with some of these relatives before for years with their mother after their father died. And it really, really struck me how strong this language was about keeping them away from the sort of evil aunts and uncles that are very grasping and they might do da 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 da.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a really interesting thing then to consider in light of Tolkien writing Bilbo in The Hobbit and his interactions with Lobelia so many decades earlier in his life than he wrote about Lobelia in the Lockholes and how Lobelia and Frodo ended things at the end of their own lives.
Oh, yeah, that's a great thing to think about. Did you want to talk a little bit more about, I guess, kind of continuing from some of the, I guess, the more biographical kind of Tolkien stuff? Maybe how Tolkien didn't really have a great understanding about what a woman's role is as the matriarch of the family, and particularly, I guess, as like an older woman's role as like the matriarch of the family, because we don't see enough older women in Tolkien except Yorith, who is really kind of more there for comic relief slash kind of there to support a point by Aragorn, really. So
She's treated as so unserious
yeah,
despite being the most accurate person in the room.
yeah, despite her actually knowing what is needed.
Yeah, it's hilarious that, like, we're talking about how Tolkien may not have, like, understood this stuff, and yet he understands that experience enough to represent it. Being the woman in the meeting who has the idea and no one listens to it until a man repeats it.
Which parts was Edith providing commentary on as she typed? Which parts get revised?
Yes. We've often talked between ourselves about Edith's role as the matriarch of the family and kind of how much did Tolkien actually understand some of that.
Yeah, I it's hard to tell, obviously, like, how much Tolkien actually would understand of that sort of thing, and I think that the Carpenter biography in particular does a really big disservice to Tolkien
Mm,
in this particular instance because of the
Mhm.
way Carpenter sets up Jurt and Edith's relationship as, like, inherently antagonistic, and, like,
mhm.
Edith is keeping him away from his writing like, friends and all of that. So I think that we get a view of Tolkien that is more isolated from family life and femininity than it actually was. Ratliff has a lovely chapter in Perilous and Fair
Mhm.
about the women in Tolkien's life where he goes into all of these aunts that Tolkien was living with his mother and how, like, influential they were to him and all of that, and, like, some of
Yes.
those aunts are, like, childless women who are, like, working, so he
Yes,
does have.
they're teachers and like scientists and yeah.
Some of those ants then are Carpenter dismisses as almost sort of like boring and so not a good fit for the boys to be there. And in terms of, terrible sins and child rearing, that's not the worst one.
Right.
Yeah. Being a stable home for two boys who've lost their parents,
How dare.
boring? How dare. Yeah. Like what a crime.
We are teasing a little bit that we are all kind of going back through the Carpenter biography, that's going to be coming information that's forthcoming in a future episode because we're not doing that as a little, stroll through the park with a daiquiri sort of thing, but like really looking at some of the challenging aspects of this biography of Tolkien and how it influences what we know and how we receive the works themselves.
Yeah. Like, I do think that Tolkien has familiarity with women in general and that they exist outside of their
Absolutely.
relationships directly with him. But I
Mhm.
do think that there's just things about being a woman that a man's never going to know, right? So,
Yeah.
like, I do think that there are blind spots that you can see
Mhm.
here, and I think one of them is what does it mean to be the matriarch of a family, and what kind of responsibilities does that really, like, thrust upon someone, and, like, also, what does it mean to age as a woman, and
That's such an interesting point because all of Tolkien's oldest women don't look elderly.
Yeah, they're
yeah,
all immortal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whereas you get some of the handful of women who look their age and their age within their lifespan, and they're treated very differently than characters who are, I don't know, 4,000 years their senior. So
Yeah.
and I like, especially thinking about this in the context of Edith and her aging process because she was chronically ill. Like, you get bits and pieces of it in the Carpenter biography, but this poor woman had migraines her entire life.
Mhm.
So, like, she's a chronically ill woman who predeceases Tolkien. So, like,
yes.
he has watched this aging process happen, but from the outside, and I don't think anyone who was socialized as a man can truly understand what aging means to someone who was socialized as a woman.
Yeah. Being socialized to place your value, understand very, very deeply that your value is only based on your appearance and some other physical attributes and physical capacities
Mhm.
like childbearing, child rearing, continuing the family line, protecting the family line. And like that's not to dismiss the pressure that men would feel as the quote unquote natural heirs to the family line and what they inherit, but really more like again kind of going back to what we were talking about where men in this big kind of Victorian gender role sort of framework, women are sort of meant to be the center of the home and also like the moral life of
Mhm.
the home and the family line. And men, they have a degree of responsibility that isn't as bound, I guess, as a woman's role is, and has a little bit more flexibility and has a little bit more ability to fuck up and a little bit more ability to be a little bit more malleable and also change like the status of the family home, whereas I should say the status of the family themselves, whereas a woman has to preserve that rather than expand or like contract it really.
Mhm.
Women are also tied to men in this period in a way that men are not tied to women, and I think that that is very important
Mm,
to
Mhm.
take into consideration because women couldn't own property. Like,
yeah.
Tolkien's literally living in a time period where the gulf between the sexes is the widest in the Victorian period than it ever had been and ever has been since, right? So that
Mhm.
Victorian Edwardian period is kind of the peak of the differentiation of the sexes and also the peak at which women had very little autonomy because,
Yeah.
you can't own property, you can't
Can't own
have bank
anything.
accounts. Yeah. So there are additional pressures there just because of that are
Mhm.
completely invisible to men during that time period.
Yeah. Oof.
And I think it's interesting then to consider Lobelia as a character who is the central character in trying to acquire and possess this property, which is the inheritance of her family and everything. And we arrive at the tensions that always exist with Tolkien of like there are moments where he's perhaps doing a little better than some of his contemporaries and also not entirely getting it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just live with those tensions.
Yep. Because he's a human, and that's what humans do.
We contain multitudes.
Contain multitudes.
I think it's interesting too, Alicia, in your paper, you made a reference to Lobelia being perceived as shrewish. And I know that Tolkien was not always the fondest of Shakespeare, but I do think it's really interesting to consider like the evolving modern perceptions of the character of Kate in The Taming of the Shrew and like whose side of things we're kind of on in like 10 Things I Hate About You and everything, like who we're here for, who we sympathize with, and how the characterization of a character as being a shrew is far more interrogated now. And there's more curiosity about what drives that and that perception instead of it just being a truth of who they are.
Yeah.
And so it's time for Lobelia to get that too.
Amen.
There's not really a good place for me to shoehorn this in, so I'm shoehorning it in right now.
Yeah, do it.
Go for it.
Lobelia is based on an actual person.
Yes.
And I
Mhm.
think that that's very important because it is an actual person. It's mentioned in letter 176 who Tolkien is making a joke about how she would set about, like, she would beat somebody with her umbrella if they were within range. But, like, the words that he uses to describe it sound like kind of respectful. Like,
Mhm.
in terms of, this woman would beat you with her umbrella, and I respect that.
Yeah,
Like,
She would beat
respectfully.
you with
Yeah.
her umbrella complimentary.
Yeah, complimentary, admiringly.
indeed,
Yes.
indeed. And I think that is, one, hilarious because I'm also on board. Sometimes someone needs to be beaten with an umbrella. I get you.
Sometimes you just need someone needs to get beaten with an umbrella.
And I also think it's interesting because the only other character we know of that was based on an actual person is Luthien.
Hmm. Yeah.
Do we know who Tolkien was basing that person or basing Lobelia on, who that person was?
Not specifically, it's mentioned that it was like a woman who like lived near him that he saw walking around a lot, which,
Okay.
with an umbrella, which the umbrella thing really stands out to me, obviously, because like there's such a emphasis on Lobelia's umbrella.
And do I recall that the person he thought she might set upon with the umbrella was W.H. Auden,
You are correct.
Yep.
who had just incredibly pettily insulted Edith's interior decorating skills, the curtains specifically.
Yes.
I do think that we probably can't shy away from the fact that we do often read the Bagginses of Bag End as queer bachelors, and that possibly the list of people who deserve a bit of a going about with an umbrella should not simply be limited to gay men, and that we should find more solidarity between us all. But
We're all on the same side, you guys. Yeah.
I still think that Lobelia is nowhere near as problematic as the narrative makes her out to be. And I think that misogyny is a really powerful force that we need to drink in less of as a
Mm.
society.
TLDR, the villain is the patriarchy.
The villain is always society. It's funny how that continues to
Villains,
come
yes, I
through.
say once again, surprise, surprise. It turns out the villain was the patriarchy all along. Like a Scooby-Doo character, you
I
pull
was
off the
thinking of the
mask.
I was
Scooby-Doo
thinking
meme.
that
Yep.
as well.
Pull off your
Mhm.
mask and you're like, "The patriarchy?"
The patriarchy the whole time.
Ah! Ugh. Well, yeah, did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on, Alicia?
Not anything that can't wait for our Fuck Humphrey Carpenter episode. Uh,
Yeah.
Derogatory.
Spicy derogatory, uh, our Carpenter episode. Yeah, well, I think that I kind of touched on everything that I was thinking about when I was reading this presentation, and I'm glad that we got to talk with you, Alicia, going through it because this is a subject that deserves lots of time, not just 15 minutes at PCA.
yeah, it was nice to dig into more of the like biographical and like kind of cultural and sociological things around this because my PCA presentation was very authorial bias, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
So, and there's so much more to it than that. Like, the reason why I am so angry at Carpenter now is because I went on this like rabbit hole surrounding like Rosie and
Mm,
like, and
Mm.
how Lobelia compares to Rosie in terms of like a good and bad mother. And that
air
led me
quotes. Yeah.
to, oh my God, Luthien and Edith, and how much does Tolkien know about women? Let me go back to the Carpenter biography, and then I was like, "Oh my god, this is like so misogynistic."
How much does Carpenter
Yeah.
know about women? Yeah.
Yeah, so I ended up on this like rabbit hole about like the authorial bias in Carpenter. And
Ugh.
I just like all this stuff about like Edith and Luthien and all of that, and I couldn't work any of that into a 15-minute long paper.
But we can do it in a podcast.
Yes, we can.
Or two, because
Or
all that Luthien
5.
stuff is
Yeah.
in a different notes document.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or 5, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to note that Luthien is a character that we haven't really delved into on the podcast, but we have now in a conference paper
Conference
and
presentation.
uh,
Yes.
And a book
some good things.
And
chapter.
a book
Exactly.
chapter.
Some exciting things that are coming with that. So we have a lot that we would want to delve into on Luthien eventually, and we'll see her kind of come up in more of our analysis going forward. And I think it was really important to get this chance to talk about Lobelia now so that we sort of get more and more of our women in Tolkien to be able to analyze some of these different themes going forward. We do still also have to talk about Shelob and Ungoliant.
Yep.
Yeah.
More bad moms.
So the way PCA works is that you give your short paper alongside like 3 to 4 other people. And one of the other people who was presenting in my little panel was presenting the monstrous feminine and Shelob. And we had this
Ooh.
whole like whispered conversation where she was like, I had never thought about the fact that it's only Lobelia and Shelob who were ever described as mothers in The Lord
Yeah.
of the Rings. And we were like whispering back and forth.
Nice.
Because it's
Nice.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Well,
Really is.
to be continued and in the future. Well, do you think we are about ready to wrap things up?
I think so.
I
Yeah,
think
I think
so.
so.
Well, thank you everyone for coming to listen to us chat about Lobelia Sackville-Baggins and her role as a difficult woman in Tolkien's Legendarium. And stay tuned for our upcoming episodes where we'll delve into these topics a little bit more and bring some new things as well. Thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for
Thank
listening.
thank you for coming out and listening with us today. Please leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us basically everywhere: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, blah, blah, blah. Like, share, and subscribe, and all of that good stuff. You can also listen to us directly on Zencaster, which is zencaster.com/queerlodging. It's a Tolkien podcast with hyphens in between all of those words. You can also listen to us on our website, which is queerlodgings.com, where we post our show notes, the resources, transcripts as they come. That takes a long time. And we also have a merch store there if you want to pick up a sticker or whatever and support us that way. If you would like, you can follow us on social. We're on Facebook at Queer Lodgings. We're on Twitter, kind of. We only post updates there, which is queer_lodgings. We are on Blue Sky, which is Queer Lodgings, and also on YouTube podcasts as Queer Lodgings 6911. Nice. Or you can just search the Queer Lodgings podcast if you would like to give us feedback or have ideas about future episodes. You can reach out to us on any of those social platforms or email us directly at queerlodgingspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you.
Oh, do we want to do Discord?
Oh, fuck yeah. We also have a Discord, guys. I feel like you should leave that in just as that happened. You can also join us on Discord. There's a link to our Discord on our website. Probably should have mentioned that when I was talking about the website, huh?
We're not rusty at all.
Fuck my life.
Rust coming off the wheels. All right.
Please, Tim, I'm sorry.
Beautiful.
Make that make sense.
Yay! We did it.
We did it. Now Tim will fix it.
Now Tim will fix it.
Yeah, that would have been tragic. Imagine
would've been
trying to stitch together an episode from our backups.
It's like, well, we got everything. We really are quite rusty, aren't we?
It's okay.
Everything's fine. Everything's cool.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Whenever you're ready.
Empty levels look good for this. For my mic. We good to go? Hearing none. Nope. Alicia's frozen.
Oh, wait. Am I? You were like
You're
a little frozen
glitchy.
before.
You're a little bit glitchy.
We're going to give it a few seconds.
Oh, wait.
Now I have no Tim.
Where did Tim go?
Tim died.
Tim lost connection. Tim's back.
It's still recording here.
Yes, it is. But Alicia's frozen now.
Tim
Yeah, I'm apparently frozen now, but I can still hear and see them.
Whoa.
No, Alicia.
Wow.
So, it is down to you, and it is down to me.
Something's trying to shut this whole production down before we even get
Promise
started.
I
I
remember
can
how to
hear
do
you,
this.
but they can't because you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, we seem to be good now.
Good.
So I don't know
Except
what-
now I can't hear either of them.
All right,
Tim
I'm gonna
Caster's
stop
like,
the
nope.
recording,
Okay.
and I'm gonna restart our
And
network.
Zencaster was like totally
Okay.
fine while we were chit chatting.
I know. When we were chatting, they were like,
Fuck's sake.
It's like that lady who does the TikToks, and although I only see them as Instagram reels of, I don't want to do the work today. I don't want to do the work today.
That's how that's
All right,
the only way I see anything on
I think
TikTok.
our Wi-Fi is fucked, so I'm about to restart our network.
Let me do all the creaking
well.
and squeaking to get there,
Well.
and I promise
It's like-
most of that was the chair and not my knees.
I was gonna say, the fuck is going on over there?
I moved my chair 2 inches. But I have an
Are
antique
you
wood
an
rolling
Android
chair
doll?
that like probably needs some WD-40.
I was gonna say, you're like the Tin Man over there, like squeaking.
Yeah,
Oh.
mine's an old, like, it's a green vinyl and, like, fucking steel chair.
Nice.
Whenever you're
Hello,
ready.
everyone.
Oh, fuck. We're amateurs. What is this?
At some point, we'll remember how to do this.
Amateur hour over here.
So,
Yeah, so like I do
think we
think
are-
Tolkien
I think
has
we are
some
teasing a little
familiarity
bit.
with it. Sorry.
we know how to podcast.
No, we don't. It's been too fucking long.
Alicia, you want to take us out?
That is kind of my job.
It has become your
If you
job.
ever want to make that one of our jobs,
Yeah, that's true. I was gonna
you
say.
should take the transcript part of what you say so that it's a script for the two of us, and then we could try
Yeah.
doing it.
We've also like been talking about just like recording it, and so we
really
don't have to do
should,
it
and
every
just
time.
Tag it on the end of it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because we could always tag something on the end of like
Yeah.
and
The main
yeah.
thing. Yep, yep. We really
Fuck
should do
yeah,
that.
we should do that.
Wait, have we already said goodbye and thanked them for?
Not yet. Let's
Nope.
do that.
Let's do that, and then I'll go into the outro.
Great.
Grace,
Well,
you're the host.
Thank you, everyone. We definitely know how to podcast.
2 for 2. Great. Going in great, coming out great.
Laughing so hard I'm crying now. Okay, here we go.
I have forgotten what I used to say for the outro. This is ungood.
It's right here.
If you just do a stinger at the end of this, it is all of our proof of we definitely know how to podcast and we've
Oh,
Definitely forgot
right.
how to do this.
Fuck me. All right, you can find us on all of Jesus fucking Christ, Alicia, get your shit together. Woo. All right.